This is the Hope Not Note podcast,
where we answer your questions and share inspirational stories to fill your soul with hope.
Our mission is to empower hope to those who have been plagued by nope.
I'm Dr. Dillon Caswell.
And I'm Brandy.
And we're here to bring you out of the nope and into hope.
Welcome to episode 6 of the Hope Not Note podcast. We're so excited that you are here, and we're so thrilled to be here with you. I just wanted to start off by saying thank you for the support. We have launched 6 episodes now, and during the launch, we have posted 2 every single week because we just desire to get you the content and really show you what we're about and who we are. But moving forward, we're going to end up going once every 2 weeks. We're going to go bi-weekly for the purpose of really wanting you to digest and soak it in and really contemplate and sit with the answers and sit with the questions and maybe go back and re-listen if you want to be inspired or what have you. And so we're so incredibly thankful for the launch and all the support that we've had, but wanted to let you know moving forward in case you're like, where's my 2 every single week? We just want to really be intentional so that you can soak it in as we're going. So thank you so much. And we're going to kick off our hope stories for this week. So Dillon, why don't you share yours?
Yeah, so my hope story, we were at a bench, end of the road, just kind of sitting there, and this car pulled up, and this person did this courageous, wild, out-of-this-world act of looking at us and smiling and waving. Mm-hmm. And it blew me away because when this happens, it's become so uncommon that this happens that you start thinking, where do I know this person from? Whose car is that? I must have ran into this person at some point for them to smile and wave at me. And it kind of caught us off guard, which was nice because we're usually not on the receiving end of that. Yeah. We're usually the ones that are trying to spread hope by a smile or acknowledging someone on the sidewalk, talking to a homeless person, just being present to people. And it was so nice to receive that back. Mm-hmm. I think often we get stuck in this mindset of, I want to do this random act of kindness. But to do it, I need to pay for someone's meal. I need to start this chain in a coffee line where I'm paying for the next person behind me. But then we kind of get caught up and it becomes an obstacle because we're like, ooh, but what if their meal's $60, $70, $100? So then we end up not acting on it. And we forget that it's the simple things that go a really long way. And to that point, we were walking the other day down the sidewalk, and this older lady was in a wheelchair, just going down the sidewalk, and her face just looked distraught, traumatized, just not joyful, just mm-hmm. like she was hurting. And we both we kind of moved to the side of the sidewalk so that she had room to get by. And as she came by, we both just looked at her and smiled and just said, "Good afternoon." Mm-hmm. And her face just lit up. So I think that's something that we can all try to do this week and every day is acknowledge one of each other just by a smile, just by a wave. It doesn't need to be, I'm paying for your meal or I'm buying this thing for you, but really just a smile goes such a long way. When my grandmother was alive, she used to say, always smile because smiles are free. Mm-hmm. And since that day, like I've always just tried to smile and give that to people because how much it lifts them up.
Yeah, it's so important. And I think of my mom she is such a smiler, and her kind of mantra as well was smile because it gives people makes people curious about what you're thinking about, you mm-hmm. know? And I think that that's something that it's a little thing, but it goes a long way.
For sure.
And a little thing that inspired me this past week is actually a big thing.
Okay.
One of my dear friends, she has been going through different medical challenges, and she was on one medication and her doctor recently switched her to another medication. And my history, when I look at the doctors I've had, it's been very focused on that one injury, nothing else around it. You know, it was just my foot. It wasn't the rest of my body or the environment I was in. It was really just kind of focused on that, where my friend, she's been going through all these different things and her levels came back and her doctor was like, you know, from the one medication to the next, they didn't change at all. And so typically in that situation, you'd feel discouraged or frustrated or what have you. But the doctor took the next step and said, I actually think that what's going on might actually be symptoms that are caused because of psychosocial things or PTSD. And so my recommendation is actually not to go on this other medication or up your dosage, but rather to go into therapy and start diving through some of these things because they might be manifesting in this illness. And when my friend told me this, I was so excited because this doctor was looking at the full picture and wasn't isolating the one thing. The doctor was really just looking at the full picture. And for us and the work that we're doing, and we have family members who don't get that. We personally have not gotten that. And so seeing someone in our life have such a positive experience, it really inspired me and encouraged me and really motivated me to continue to do what we're doing, because we want to really inspire all people, including healthcare providers, to look at the full picture.
Yeah, and it shows a beautiful picture of that. What matters is teamwork.
Mm-hmm.
And this quote has always sat with me, that the hallmark of clinical expertise is generalized perspective before specialized testing.
Mm.
And another way to explain that is, you don't know what microscope slide you're looking at underneath the microscope unless you've got it from a slide bin that pulled up and said that this is what I'm looking at. So we need generalized perspective before we get into specialized testing. But the issue is that we have so many specialists, and there's a lot of egos involved. That I have my specialist degree, so that means I want to give you the answer. I want to be your solution. And when we look at the word illness, it starts with an I. When we turn I to we, illness now becomes wellness. So how do we start to have an impact on society and on health? We need wellness, which is we. Mm. So we have a lot of specialists that can do incredible things, and we need them. But we also need our specialists to realize, like this person did, which is incredible, in a transactional system, said, I've done what I can do for you, and it did not lead to the solution. Let's get you to someone that can get you to that solution. Yeah. That is teamwork. That is we. That's wellness. And that makes me so excited.
Yeah.
Like I need to stay sitting for the camera, but I want to jump right now because of how excited that makes me.
Right. Me too. I mean, it's just encouraging and motivating, and I just got so hyped up. I'm so pumped about it. So I'm so happy for my friend too, because she's in a place where she feels courageous and is going to dive into it. Where I know some people, they prefer the medication. They're like, I just want the medication and whatever. But my friend's ready to tackle it. And I applaud her for the courage, and I applaud the doctor and people who are we focused, because it's so important.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so let's hop into the questions this week. And just a reminder, we're so thankful for this opportunity to share these hope stories. And we hope that as you've listened to the past 6 episodes, that you've been inspired. And if you have, please go rate and review and share, because it helps us continue to, do this and inspire people moving forward.
And reach out. We both have received DMs and emails and text messages or face-to-face interactions of people that have found their own hope story in listening to one of the episodes, and the episode spoke to them and brought them back to the obstacles that they got over, and what led them to that. So that stuff that makes this, and it's already that makes it so much even more worth it.
Right.
Is hearing that people are able to reflect on their own story and feel hopeful and reflect back and go, dang, I am pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Like I did that thing when people told me nope, and I kept fighting and fighting and fighting, and now I am hope.
Mm-hmm. Oh, exactly. I love it. So let's dive into the questions. Our first question is from a listener named Cody, and he asks, what advice do you have for someone who is trying to break an unhealthy habit or addiction?
Cody, thank you for that question. It's a great question, and I think a lot of people are wondering this, and a lot of people have tried these different methods and are still kind of falling back into these old behaviors, because the brain works by wiring and by patterns. We're not stuck with the wiring that we have. There's this thing called neuroplasticity that you can rewrite your behaviors, but you have to do the actions for that to happen. And that's the hard part. Like you can have the education, you can have the information that this is a behavior that I want to change, but it's a good step. But unless you put the action in, it doesn't come to fruition. So how do we start to change habits? And let me use this example because I think there's two different things, and I'll use references from two different books that I've been reading. One of them is from the Silva mind control method. Not that we're like mind control, like I'm going to make this microphone levitate with my brain, but more of just how do we start to have ownership of our thoughts and how do we get to different brain states where we can think more clearly. And what they stated in there, which I thought was incredible advice, is to not think of don't do this thing. Don't press that red button. What do you want to do?
Press the red button.
Press the red button. We're in Best Buy, right? They have these speakers and you can press the button and it plays the volume and it's like, don't turn it up past this volume. Well, now I'm turning that thing up because it says don't do this. So when we say don't smoke, don't have that next drink, don't go to fast food, don't get that energy drink, our brain automatically goes, now I'm going to do that because you said don't do that. We have to start reshaping that thought process. And instead of saying, don't do this thing, we need to reflect on what will our life look like once that pattern has been developed. So maybe it's weight loss. And maybe there's this nice piece of cake that's staring you in the face. You want to eat this thing. And you know how good it tastes because no matter what diet you're on, cake does taste good.
We love cake.
So you want to eat this thing, but you know that it's not fitting into what your plan is or the behavior that you want. So you have to have this battle. You say, don't eat the cake. Give me the fork. I'm eating that cake. But when you go, well, what if I choose to not have the cake? What will my life look like a year from now? What will my life look like if I do lose that 30 pounds that I wanted to lose? What will my body feel like if I lose that weight that I've wanted to lose? So we have to start thinking about, if I give up this behavior and I replace it with another behavior, what is the reward of that behavior? Because when we do that, now we get into the neurochemistry in the brain. Now we have dopamine. Now we have the reward circuit that's firing. And now the brain's going to go, ooh, I like rewards. Let me go towards that reward instead of saying, don't do this thing. So think about what could happen if you do make that decision to change that behavior. So that's one. The next tip would come from the environment. We are conditioned to go into a behavior from a trigger that then creates that response to happen. So we have to start becoming aware of what are these triggers in the environment that cause this thing to happen. Atomic Habits by James Clear, phenomenal book, but he states in there, environment is the invisible hand that shapes human behavior. And that couldn't be more true. If you don't want to buy energy drinks, don't go into the store at the gas station where the energy drinks are on sale for like the best deal around. Pay for the gas outside. If you want to change the habit of eating fast food, try to drive a different route that you're not going by all these fast food restaurants. So understand what are these triggers that are causing it, and then how do you reshape your environment to not have that behavior happen. So personal example I can give you guys, back in 2019, I developed this habit where I was working, I opened a satellite office in a CrossFit gym. I was coaching CrossFit. I was working on my board specialty in sports. So I was working with a few different teams, traveling with them, going to their games. It was long days, long work weeks. When I got back to my place, I would plop on the couch and turn on The Office. No regrets. I love that show. It was very joyful. Learned so much leadership qualities from Michael Scott that we continue to practice today. So I don't regret that. But in that season, I decided I want to change that habit, because 7 nights a week, I should not be watching a show. Like, there's more to life. The show gave me a lot of life, I will say that. But there's more things. I want to read more, because I think if I read more, I'll learn more. And if I learn more, then I can be more impactful to more people. So I wanted to read more. Well, how do you read more? Well, you pick up the book. Well, do I pick up the book when the TV, the couch, and the remote are right there next to it? I'm choosing the TV. It's more entertaining. I don't have to work as hard at it. I get to plop, veg out, and watch the show. But I decided, no, I want to make this change. I want to change this behavior. So I realized I need to change the environment. I need to change the triggers. And if I make it harder to access that thing, then it's harder to perform that habit. So what did I do? I hid the remote. And then after I hid the remote, I was like, I know where I hid the remote. I can just go find it. So then I was like, I need more steps. Hide the remote, unplug the TV. Now, if I want to watch it, I have to plug the TV in and find the remote. Side thought makes me think of back when TVs, you had to get up and like change the channel, like with your hand dial, but not remotes. But anyway, so unplug the TV, hide the remote. Well, now I can plug the TV and find the remote. Well, now if I take the batteries out of the remote, hide the batteries in different places, unplug the TV and hide the remote. Now there's all these obstacles in the way to me wanting to watch this TV show. Now reading is more appetizing because now it's less effort. It's least resistance than it would be to watching the TV show. So in doing that, now I develop this habit. After I develop this habit, okay, now I'm more accustomed to what reading is giving me because I'm feeling the benefits of it. I'm feeling more educated. I could have better conversations with people. Now I can bring the TV back into the environment and not be as conditioned to that trigger as I once was. So wrapping that up, look at what is the environment, and then what does your life look like once you are doing that thing, once you reach that goal, once you've reached that vision, what does your life look like? And constantly, painfully reflect on that day by day by day of what that life looks like. And that's going to lead you to who you're intended to be. You just got to keep stacking it up.
Yeah. Oh, I love those. And I want to add one, even though I haven't read a book about habits. But I think the other thing is accountability, right? Because those other, like looking at your environment and dreaming about your life, like that takes you to do it. And maybe you struggle with discipline or something and you need outside help, right? And so accountability is huge. And I look at different habits that I've had in the past. I've asked people to hold me accountable who I love, and they're some of my closest friends, but they are not disciplined and they are not detail oriented and they want me to break the habit, but like they get distracted very easily. Those are not the people to hold you accountable. The people to hold you accountable are the people who are like gonna help you achieve the goal. They're disciplined, they're committed, they're loyal in that big way, and they just have those natural gifts. And I've had people do that, and it's been so helpful. And when you ask someone to hold you accountable, you need to create a game plan essentially for what they're holding you accountable for. So whether like there was a time where I was texting someone an update at the end of every day to let them know how I did on that habit during that day. There's been times where I say, hey, can you check in with me once a week just to see where I'm at with my headspace or my anxiety or whatever, because I just need that extra person's help, you know? And so I think when you're trying to break a habit or even an addiction, having someone to hold you accountable and someone that's actually going to hold you accountable is also very helpful.
Yeah, and there's good data showing this, because when do most people decide that they want to change their behavior, their habit? New Year's resolutions.
Right.
How many New Year's resolutions come to fruition? Not a lot. But the data shows that when you share it with another person, it now becomes somewhere to 70, 80% more effective that you will reach that behavior or that goal. Now you have an accountability partner, a person that's checking in on you and helping you stay on that path. Because once you start on the path, one thing that's certain is a lot of things are going to try to bump you off that path. You're trying to quit smoking, and there's a billboard of smoking ads. Right. You're trying to quit smoking, and the gas station has a deal on it. So there's all these things that are trying to pull you off of the path that you have set. And so adding on to that, you need an accountability partner, you need a plan, but you also need to have your values figured out.
Yeah.
Because on that path, once things try to pull you off of that, your values become the guardrails that will keep you on the path to the destination. So establish the values, those will help keep you on that path. And if you do get off the path, which is going to happen because we're human and it's going to happen, just don't beat yourself up. Get back on that path as soon as you can. And then what else you can use from that is, now the next time that you are feeling like you're getting off that path, remember how much it sucked, how much it hurt, how much you let yourself down when you got off that path. Like now you can reflect on that experience, not too much, don't dwell on it,
right.
But you can reflect on that and go, you know, for that 3 minutes of joy, that brought me a lot of pain. And I don't want to do that again. That led to this outcome. I want to do a different outcome. Here's my values. Let me stick on this path.
Right. Oh, I love that. Great answer. Our next question is from a listener named Mary Ann, and she asks, in your book, you mentioned that bones do not pop out of place like many chiropractors suggest. Can you explain this a little further?
Yeah. So this is a great question. It'll be a little bit of a longer answer because there is a framework that needs to be added to it. But where I want to start with this is back to the beginning of when I turns to we, illness turns to wellness. In forming your team, you have to choose who do you want on your team. And so I will say this as I've worked with really great chiropractors. I've worked with really bad chiropractors. I've worked with really great sports medicine physicians. I've worked with really bad sports medicine physicians. And what do I mean by good and bad? It's their intention. Their intention to truly care for you versus I'm just doing this so that I get a paycheck, right? Type of thing. So with that being said, this idea of can bones pop out of place? Yes, right? We have dislocations and subluxations. But what happens when a joint dislocates? It hurts like crazy. So if your spine dislocates or subluxes, and your spine is meant to be the protector of one, it creates the form that gives the space for all your vital organs, and then the rib cage comes off of that to protect the things that we need to stay alive. The way that we were designed is incredible to be strong and robust. So if the strongest structure in our body can just move in and out, well, that's a pretty poor design. The other part of this is what is going through the vertebrae of the spinal column, the spinal cord. So if a vertebrae is out of place or out of alignment, there should be a lot of nerve changes that happen. Either the leg's not working, the arm's not working anymore, the reflexes have changed. That is a medical emergency. It takes a lot of force for a vertebrae to go out of place. I'm talking a car accident, a fall from greater than 10 feet where you're landing on your tailbone. Like it takes a lot of force for a vertebrae to go in and out of place. So to the question, can bones, and speaking of the vertebrae, can they go in and out of place? Yes. But the force is a lot of force to do that. So then what about the narrative of, well, your back is sore, or there's so many other narratives that we can provide. I won't go down that rabbit hole.
We could talk about it for like 65 minutes.
Yeah. So
4 hours.
Yeah, you're misaligned. So we do this thing and we're realigning your vertebrae, and that's going to help your health or this condition, whatever it may be. Well, all the research now disproves that happening. And there's a lot of different angles that we can come at this from. One is that the force in a manipulation or an adjustment is not enough force to create a change at the vertebral level because of how strong and robust it is. The other part of this is, well, I hear the pop happening. So what is that pop? Because when I hear the pop, it must mean that my joint is changing. All that's happening when that pop is that joints have pressures. They have an atmospheric pressure. When this force is added to it, the joint atmospheric pressure changes, which then forms a bubble. The bubble forming is what creates the popping noise, not the bubble collapsing. The bubble forming creates that. It's this theory of tribonucleation, which has been shown on MRIs. Now, when that bubble forms and then it collapses, nothing changes in the joint. Nothing mechanically, no properties of the joint changes. It's just a bubble that comes and then goes, to the point that this physician, Dr. Donald Unger, he cracked the knuckles on his right hand for like 50 or 60 years, something around that. And then he tried not to crack the knuckles on the other hand. They did imaging pre and post with this idea of cracking your joints creates arthritis. And there was no changes between the joints whatsoever.
Wow.
So the popping that we hear, it's just a bubble forming, right? So you can do that by leaning over your chair. You can do that in all these different ways. You can create these bubbles forming. Well, don't I need an expert to do the pops, to quote unquote put this thing back in? Well, in order to say that you need an expert to do that, this test needs to be validated. And the validation is typically an x-ray and then palpation. Well, so palpation is going down the spine, pressing on it and going, oh yeah, L5 is a little bit more forward than L4 or L3. So this is where we need to pop this joint in order to get it back into place. So I did the studies with people that were called expert palpators, whether it was a chiropractor, a physical therapy, an osteopath, because this is used in all of those professions. So it's not just chiropractors, it's everyone that's using this subluxation theory. So the expert palpators, they all saw the same patient and they all came at different levels of where the dysfunction was.
Wow.
So there was no reliability between them. So that the test is saying that you need this thing to do this thing, but now the test isn't accurate between providers. So that is showing us that that test really isn't appropriate. It's not giving us the information that we think that it is. And there's other studies showing that the better that you become at palpating, the least reliable it becomes. So if you're an expert palpator and I'm an expert palpator, the better that we get, in theory, we should come up with the same answer because we become better at palpating. But the reality is, what research is showing is that as you get better, as I get better at palpating, our answers actually become more and more different from each other. So from the test, we know that it's a little fishy of what's happening in there. Last part of the research, kind of summing that up, is that if the subluxation theory is true and this joint is out and you put it back in, it should have an effect on that area. But the research is showing that if you have, for example, anterior knee pain and you do a lumbar spine manipulation or adjustment, the pain then decreases or subsides. If you have cervical pain and you do a manipulation of the thoracic spine or an adjustment of the thoracic spine, the mid-back, the cervical spine pain can then be alleviated. And it's not this effect of like a ring dinger happening where all these segments were out and now they're stacking back on top of each other. You're changing the nervous system. You're giving an input that then changes the output, and that's what's happening. So the Canadian Chiropractic Association actually put out a position paper and said, can we stop using, I'm paraphrasing, can we stop using the subluxation theory? The only reason that it should be taught is in historical context of where this stuff came from. But the research of the subluxation theory, which is joints being in and out, the research on that theory disproved its own theory.
Wow.
So do manipulations and adjustments, do they have a time and place? Yes, right? It's a team approach. It's not I, it's we. But it's making sure that your team is setting you up for success. What does that not look like? Well, it looks like this. Brandy, I need you to come in 3 to 5 times a week because you're misaligned and you need this thing to be aligned, or else you're going to have significant back pain. Because now you're so afraid to move. And kind of a side note, if this pop is putting it back in and you stand up and crack, well, did it just come back out again? Right. If that was like truly happening. But now there's this fear narrative that this thing that gives you rise to life, this thing that is housing your spinal cord and creating structure for your vital organs, is a slippery fish that's just plopping in and out of place. How afraid are you going to be to move? And I've worked with so many patients that had this narrative that they're afraid to reach down and pet their cat or their dog because they're afraid that their vertebrae is going to go flying out their back. And they're not being taught that that theory is invalid. Like, we can't fully prove stuff, but we can disprove stuff. And that theory has been disproved. So there's a lot of really great osteopaths, chiropractors, physical therapists that are using adjustments and manipulations, but the narrative around it is different. The narrative is that we're using this as a short-term relief of your symptoms. Now we're going to get into the longer-term changes, whether that's leaning into mental fortitude or leaning into physical training. This is going to create the long-term response versus saying you need this in order to get better.
Right. I'm thankful that you kind of gave the history and the research behind it, because I think we've talked about it, but there's times where I just want to tell my family or my friends or my community, like, your bones are not popping in and out of place. Like, that literally is not impossible, but essentially impossible if you twist your ankle and you like hear a crack and you're like, oh no, now my ankle's out. Like, that's not how it works. It's not that, it's not that common, I guess. It's not as common as people play it out. So the research is helpful, but it's really the simple of, you may need this adjustment, but if you do go to a chiropractor or PT or what have you, go in without the idea of, oh, I'm popping in and out. Go with the idea of there's an adjustment happening or manipulation happening, but that's really just your brain needing a different input, right?
Absolutely. And another example, because I hear this all the time, and I'll be honest, when I was an assistant, I was learning this method of the SI joint being out and popping it back in. And shout out to Dr. Dolphin, who changed my whole perspective on that, because the SI joint moves very, very, very small. It's not detectable by your fingers. It's not detectable by your thumbs being on the PSIS and a person doing a prone press up or leaning forward. You cannot feel what's happening. It's too deep. You need sensors that are put through the skin to the SI joint with imaging to see this thing moving.
Wow.
We are not doing that with palpation and motion testing. Secondly, research from emergency medical rooms have shown that a person can come in after a really bad car accident, fracture their thighs, have fractures in their spine, and the only thing that is still stable is their SI joint.
Wow.
So when does that change potentially? Well, during pregnancy, because space needs to be made for this growing baby inside of you. So at that point, maybe the SI joint has a little bit more motion into it, but it's still not popping in and out of place. The discomfort is because there's something pressing on an area that normally isn't pressing there
right.
anymore, not something being out of place. So it really becomes scary for people when they're getting that narrative. So we can still use manipulations, and I think adjustments are appropriately termed. But the question becomes, what are we adjusting? We are not adjusting your spinal column. We're not adjusting how they're stacked on top of each other. We're not adjusting something being out and putting it back in. We're adjusting your nervous system. We're giving a different input to change the output of that. And I will go on to say this because this gets me really upset from the research that is out there and the side effects that are potential from like a cervical manipulation and seeing these things done. Of seeing videos of this being done on dogs and on babies and on like people that you don't need to have this done to reach what your health and wellness goals are, but they're being told that it is needed. And people are saying, well, we can't disprove this because the science hasn't caught up to what we're doing because it's working off of a different theory. Well, the science that has actually disproved this theory came from the people that are using this theory. So the science is there. If the science wasn't there, it'd be a little bit different. But the science is there now. So now we have to choose as part of our team, are we all on the same page? Because if I'm telling you that you're robust, you're resilient, you're strong, you can deadlift, but then another provider is telling you that your vertebrae is popping in and out, we're not on the same page. Now as a client or as a patient, you're confused on what you should be doing next. You're not sure where to go. You're being told you're strong and resilient, but yet the strongest part of your body is popping in and out. So that's not a team that we're all moving the same direction.
Right.
We're in a rowboat going in a circle instead of paddling the same way. So if you're listening, choose your team wisely. Make sure that people are telling you, like the surgeons that I've worked with, the chiropractors I've worked with, the osteopaths I've worked with, we're all speaking the same language because we've all kept up to date on the evidence and we're using the art and the science. It can't just be an art. It can't just be a science. There has to be an art and a science. And when science is telling us that something is not happening, we have to honor that. Science doesn't tell us what is happening. It tells us what's not happening. So we have to respect that.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I think too, when choosing a team, if two people or two things are incongruent, go to the one that's empowering you to be the best person possible. You know, like I have been the person on the other side who went to a chiropractor twice a week for 6 months, if not more, and would rely on going to the chiropractor regularly for years and years of my life because I believed I was fragile. And it wasn't until really working with Dillon that I realized I am not fragile. I am very strong. And it was a new narrative that empowered me to be the best person possible. And like that's the team I want to be on, and I want to be congruent, and I want to be empowered. I want to be able to empower other people. And so if this is news to you, if this is kind of like a shock, and like we mentioned in the beginning of the episode, we're taking 2 weeks and we're doing every 2 weeks now so that you can digest these things. Digest this and really ask yourself, who's on my team? Who do I want to be on my team? And am I being empowered on my team?
Yeah. And also, like, where is your information coming from? like if people are saying that this thing is happening, well, can you show me a paper on this, and not a blog that's written on your own website, but can you show me a peer-reviewed paper that was in a scientific journal that shows that this is what's happening? Because when the Chiropractic Association puts out a position statement saying, stop using this theory, we know that you're using it for paychecks and not for helping people, like stop using this, we have to honor that. So show me the paper. Like, it doesn't need to be this thing, show me the paper. But like, can we have this dialogue where if you're telling me that this is the thing that's happening, well, what data do you have to show that this is? And if it is just your opinion, share that with me, because I trust you as a provider. And if you're saying it's your opinion, well, you've probably formed that for good reasons. So share that with me, but also present that side of the science, which I do with people all the time. Here's the science. Here's my thoughts and opinions. Take both of them. Go make your own decision with that.
Love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
So moving on to our last question. This is from a listener named Jake. And he asks, do you believe there's such thing as too much hope, meaning pushing oneself too hard through injury or illness? And do you think that hope can coexist with balance?
Wow. Phenomenal question. I will say that hope has to coexist with balance, because when we look at least our working definition of hope, which comes from C.R. Schneider, who was a hope researcher at the University of Kansas. If you haven't heard that before, yes, there's hope researchers that are actually looking at this thing. But for hope to exist, it's self-agency, goals, and a framework to achieve. So I don't think that we can have too much hope. I do think that out of those three things, those trilogies that make hope come alive, that one of those can be incorrect, incongruent, or not providing the best plan for you to get to that hope, right? So for hope to exist, self-agency, framework to achieve, and goals. So if you are constantly pushing and you're becoming ill because of that push, well, either the goal is inappropriate or the framework that you've gotten needs to change. So if we're using that as a working definition, we can't have too much hope, because hope won't exist if the framework is incorrect or the goal is either too big or too small to achieve. So it'd be looking at those three factors. And once we have those three factors, then it'll be good. If you try to push too far with a poor framework or an inappropriate goal, your body's going to let you know. It's going to give you those signals. It's going to request the change. So we have to become more open. We have to slow down. We have to listen to what our body is telling us, what our coaches are telling us, what our team is telling us, to then realize, if I'm doing too much, then is that really hope? Or am I just being kind of steered in the wrong direction? Anything you would add to that?
I think that's phenomenal. I thought you were going to go off for like 45 minutes about this answer, but it really is that simple. I think too, I'm a big push through person. I'm a big like, push yourself to whatever you can and all this stuff. But I think that there is a level of pushing yourself to a point that it's not healthy for your injury or your illness, or just your personhood, and then it could potentially cause injury or illness. But I think with hope, there's always hope, but we talk about this often. Hope is not this passive thing, and I think that I'd love for you to dive into that as well, because hope is not passive. Just dive in, because I think that there's some things to be said about that in regards to this question.
Yeah. I think simply stated, hope is earned and learned. You have to earn hope. So if you have goals and you have a framework, but you don't put the work in, active work, it's not going to come to fruition. If you have those three things, that trilogy that leads to hope, but you're just sitting around waiting for it to happen, it's not going to happen. You have to put the work in for it to be achieved. And diving into this too, I will say that initially it was one of the biggest challenges I had working with elite athletes, is telling them, no, you're done today. You've already done a 2-hour session. You're not going to do an extra rep. You're done today. No, I want to get to the playoffs. I want to get to the Super Bowl. I want to get to the champ, whatever it may be. I want to get there. You're not going to get there 100% in the session. So that framework sometimes is the coach or the provider or your accountability partner saying, you've done enough right now. The framework is a long-term framework. We need to pull you back because you're trying to do too much, right? So if you have an appropriate framework, it'll constantly lead you towards hope, even if it is pulling you back a little bit. So that's kind of the other side of the spectrum of people that are trying to do too much all at once. No, you need to build this up. It's brick by brick that we're building this. Trust the process, trust the plan. I love your effort. I love your intensity of this. I understand why you're pressing so hard, but we need to pull this back a little bit. And then the other side, if you're too passive in the sense of you're not working at all, you're not going to get there. So at different seasons, things are going to change where you are pushing more, you're pushing a little bit less, but that comes back to the framework. The framework needs to be stable in order for you to get to experiencing that full glory of hope.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's phenomenal. And this episode has been all about teamwork. It really has. It's been about knowing who your team is. It's about being we-oriented, not I-oriented. And it's about having a framework for hope. And so I hope that this podcast really has blessed you because, you know, we're here, we're answering these questions, but our desire is that we can be a team with you. We can be a community with you. It's our hope community who's asking these questions. And so if you want to ask a question, head over to our website, hopenotnope.org, because you can ask a question there. We'd love to answer it on this now moving forward bi-weekly podcast. And we really want this to be a benefit for your life. And so please go ask a question. And while you're at it, please rate and review this on Apple and Spotify. Share it with a friend. We want to get this message out. We want to inspire and empower more people. And the way that we do that is through you helping us in that as well.
Absolutely. And smile with people. Smile with people. Have a great week. And remember, every day is not just a day to be hopeful. It's an opportunity to become hope.